Family vacations have a strange way of dragging old labels back into the light, no matter how much time has passed, and this one did exactly that. Beginning the moment I stepped onto the stone driveway of the resort where the air smelled faintly of salt and citrus, and everything, from the polished floors to the perfectly timed greetings, was designed to whisper exclusivity rather than announce it. My parents had arrived earlier that afternoon in a rented luxury SUV. My older brother Mark had posted photos online before he even unpacked, and my younger sister Claire was already talking about how this trip proved that our family had finally made it, a phrase she had always liked to use as if success were a finish line you crossed once and never had to defend again. And when I arrived alone, no flashy watch on my wrist, no designer luggage, just a small duffel and a calm that came from years of not needing to impress anyone, Mark let out a laugh that echoed a little too loudly in the open-air lobby and asked if I had wandered into the wrong place, saying this resort wasn't exactly budget-friendly, while Claire tilted her head with that polite smile she used when she wanted to sound caring but still make her point, suggesting she hoped I hadn't stretched myself financially just to keep up appearances, and a couple of cousins snickered, as if the conclusion had already been reached without evidence. I didn't correct them, not because I couldn't, but because military life had taught me that correcting assumptions often feeds them, and silence, when chosen deliberately, reveals far more than explanations ever do. So I stood back while they crowded the check-in desk, talking loudly about room upgrades, oceanfront villas, loyalty points, and how much everything must cost. My father Robert shaking his head with a mixture of concern and mild disappointment as he turned to me and said I should have told them if I needed help, that there was no shame in struggling, and I nodded once and thanked him quietly, which only seemed to confuse him more because gratitude didn't fit the narrative he had already written for me. Drinks arrived in the lounge shortly after, crystal glasses sweating in the heat, conversations flowing easily about careers, promotions, business deals, and who had managed to turn the right opportunities into visible success. And when my name came up again, it was with the familiar refrain that I'd never really settled into anything, that I'd always been vague, always moving, always hard to define, and I listened without interruption, sipping water, thinking about how often people mistake privacy for failure, until the resort manager approached, a man named Julian whose posture shifted the moment he saw me, his steps slowing, his expression sharpening into recognition as he addressed me first instead of the group, greeting me with a respectful nod and a quiet, "Welcome back, sir," words that caused Claire to blink and Mark to glance around as if someone else must have been standing behind me. And when Julian turned to the rest of my family and apologized for the brief delay before explaining that their villas were prepared and thanking me for allowing my family to enjoy the property, the word "allowing" landed heavily, slowly, like something that needed to be examined from every angle, my father frowning openly now as he repeated it under his breath and asked what that meant, Julian smiling politely as he clarified that the resort was privately owned, and then turning back to me to ask whether I'd prefer the staff briefing before dinner or afterward, the silence that followed stretching long enough for discomfort to settle in, Mark letting out a nervous laugh and asking if this was some kind of joke. And that was the moment I finally spoke, not to claim anything, not to emphasize, but simply to state a fact, explaining that after leaving service I'd invested quietly, carefully, and that this resort had been one of those projects, no dramatic reveal, no pride in my voice, just the truth delivered plainly. Claire's face flushing as she asked if I owned the place, and I corrected her gently, saying I was one of the owners and that I preferred to stay out of sight, Julian nodding once more before stepping away, leaving my family standing in a new silence that felt different from before, heavier but also more honest. The conversations that followed softer, more measured, as if everyone were recalibrating the way they spoke to me now that the old assumptions had collapsed. And later that evening my father pulled me aside on the balcony overlooking the darkening ocean, admitting quietly that he hadn't known, that I'd never said anything, and I told him just as calmly that I hadn't needed to, that I wasn't building a story for anyone else, just stability for myself. And as the waves rolled in below and the lights of the resort reflected off the water, I thought about something the military had taught me early and reinforced often. That real success doesn't announce itself, doesn't argue its case, doesn't rush to correct every insult or misunderstanding. Sometimes it simply waits, patiently, until the truth introduces itself on its own terms.